Okay, hello guys. Today we are going to talk about conditional statements in Python. And in the previous lessons, we were talking about primitive data types, and now we move forward to conditional statements. And what are conditional statements? These are statements that that helps us to make decisions in programs. So these are just statements to help us make decisions. So there are times that we need to make decisions, and that's when we use if statements. So if this happened, do this. If this happens, do this. So let's take an example. So let's say you are building a program to limit the person going into a club based on their age. So what do? You first create a variable called age. Then you say, let's say this person's age is 25. You want to create a program that checks the person's age and then limits the person whether he or she is eligible to join the club or not. So what do? You start with an if statement. You just write if what happens. So an if statement is always evaluated when it evaluates to true, and it's not evaluated if it evaluates to false. So in the previous lectures we talked about the false values, true the values. Now here you need a statement that either evaluates to true or false. If it evaluates to true, then the code block is gone through by the interpreter. So what do? If age is greater than or equals to 18. So don't worry about the font ligatures that I'm using here. This is similar to do like greater than is equals to, just that I'm using font ligatures to that is joining them together. Okay, so I hope that's okay. You see, it is merging those fonts together, so it's just a greater than. So what does this evaluate to? So if is age greater than 18, greater than or equals to 18, yes, our age is 25, so these statements evaluates to true. So to terminate an if statement, use a colon. And now here we find the important part that a lot of beginners make. And so this is about code blocks. So if I press enter, you'll see that there is a space left between the starting line and the these are, it is normally 4 spaces. So let's 4 spaces or a tab. 1 2 3 4, or just a tab. Just press tab. So what does this mean? This means that anything that is indented, you can see here this indented block. An indented block is a block that will be evaluated if the if statement evaluates to true, and it is ignored if the if statement evaluates to false. So what do we do here? We can say print eligible. Eligible. Let's print something else. You are allowed to join. So that's what we have printed. If you still want to do something inside this if statement, we can do that here. We can say print still in the block. So anything inside this block would be evaluated when the if statement evaluates to true. Okay, so let's see. Now if you get out of the if statement, that means that you are out of the if statement. You can see I'm out here, and then I can print something here like I'm out. I'm out of the if block. Okay, so if we run this program, what do we see? So you can see Python app.py. So you can see what we printed in the first case. You see we printed you are allowed to join because this if statement was evaluated. You are allowed to join. We are still in the block because we are still in the indented block. So take note on that. We still need to be the indented block, because inside this indented block is what will be evaluated when this if statement evaluates to true. Okay. Now you can see here we have this print outside of the block. That means you are still outside the block. So let's say the age is 16, 15. What happens if the age is 15? Now we only see this line printed. Why? Because this one evaluated to false, and if it evaluates to false, that's over for it. Nothing will be evaluated here inside. So this one will be ignored, and it won't be evaluated. Now you might ask, what if I want to do something? If you are less than 18, or maybe you are between a certain age, I want to print something else. How do I go about that? So in an if block, if an if block evaluates to false, it checks for other if statements. But now, if an if block is continuing, we have another, it's not, else if something else happen, if something else happens. So we have another one to use, which is called else if. Else if, which is a short form for elif. So you use elif. This one means if the first one failed, try this one. So we can say if age is greater than 12, we can print something else here. You can say, hey, you are near to be allowed. You'll be allowed in some years to come. Okay, you will be allowed in few years to come. Okay, so what does that mean? What does that mean? So that means if this one evaluates to false, now it will check for the else block, else if block, which means please check this one. If this one fails, please check this one. But if this one evaluates, all the other else if blocks are ignored. Okay, yes. So you can add many nested if statements as you want, but there is also a special if clause called the else block. So we have the else block. Now else, you can print, hey, you are just a kid. Okay, so you print if else you are just a kid. So what does this mean? So the else block is a special type of if block, which is evaluated if all the others evaluate to false. So this one is like the default. This one is what will print if everything else is defaulting to false. So what does that happen? That mean? So that means if this one evaluates to true, these two will be ignored. And if this one evaluates to false and this one evaluates to true, the else block will be ignored. But if this one fails, evaluates to false, this one evaluates to false, then you print the else block. This is just like a fallback. Like we say, if everything goes wrong, print this one. Okay, so let's see what we get. So this guy is 15. So we expect to see that the second block to evaluate. So we can print, can just go back here. You will be allowed in few years. I hope you can see this. So you will be allowed in few years to come. What if we are less than 12, like 10? What would this evaluate to? Hey, you are just a kid. What does that imply? That means you can nest many if statements as you want, as many as you want, to make decisions based on something. So we are just printing something out here. Maybe you have complex logic to do something else. You do that logic here inside the if statements, depending on what you want to do. Okay, hope that is okay. So yes, that's okay. Let's say we have this is an age of a person who is not. I talked about truth values in my previous lectures. So let's see what happens. Now I can write something like this. If age, print you are already born. And then we can add the else clause. We have talked about the else clause. Very simple. Print, hey, you are not born yet. Okay, so what does this mean? So someone might see something like this and is like, hey, what is this, what is this evaluating to? So this one is the same concept, but we talked about false values. We have false values are values that evaluate to false. We have the number 0, we have empty strings, we have empty list. We'll talk about list later. We have empty objects, we have none. Yeah, these ones evaluate to false. What does age evaluate to? Age is 0, so age would be false. And then that means if we say if age, this block won't, if age is 0, this block won't be evaluated. So let's see if that's the case. Hey, you are not born yet. Okay, so these are values that evaluate to false. If age is 10, now age is true now, and then we can print we talked about everything else apart from these are true values. So that means if age will be true, age will be true, and then if true, then we evaluate that block. So you are already born. Simple as that, as simple as that. Okay, so we have talked about the eligible and non-eligible. We want to print something like if age is greater than 18, say we can print eligible. Let's print like that, no problem. Can say not eligible. So what will this evaluate to? We have not eligible because this one, at this case, this one is age 10. We have a cleaner syntax to write the same logic. So we can say eligible is equals to age. This is just a syntax. It is called the ternary operator. So let me show you. This one is called this one is called the ternary operator, which is just like plain English to write. So you have to practice more on it so that it can become second nature. So you start with your logic. So is age greater than 18? Now we can do something like, we start with what we want. Eligible if age is greater than 18. If age is greater than, then else not eligible. So this is like plain English. This one is like plain English. So you can see eligible is assigned. Eligible is now a variable. Eligible is assigned either eligible. We can say not. Let's call this one is eligible. We talked about variable namings, which is you name the variables. You can say true, then you can return false. So what does this mean? Just like plain English, if you have this syntax in your code, you can simply replace that with this one. So eligible is eligible. We start with the what we want to assign the eligible. We start with the if. In the if, we start with the what we want to assign. So in this case, we want true. Assign true if age is greater than 18. Else, if something else happened, assign eligible is eligible to false. So when you print is eligible, what do we get? So when you print is eligible, we find that this one is not eligible because it's age 10, and age 10 is not greater than 18. So what are we returning here? We say assign is eligible true if the age is greater than 18, else assign false. So that's all for today. And then as always, we do a challenge on what we have learned to ferment what we have learned. So this is a common interview question that is commonly asked, and it's called the FizzBuzz. So the FizzBuzz utilizes the conditional statements. Okay, so let's read out what you are expected to do. So given an integer n, okay, we talked about integers. These are just whole numbers, negative or positive whole numbers. Return a string array. We won't do that. We won't return an array. We want to return the following. So basically, let me remove these ones to prevent complication. So basically, we want to loop through. Let me remove this one. We have to create a loop. Create a loop from 0 to 100 and print the following. So create a loop from 0 to 100, and in each number, first check if the number is divisible by 3 and 5. If that's true, then you print FizzBuzz. If it's not, if it's divisible by 3, print fizz. If it's divisible by 5, print buzz. If none of the above match, okay, if none of the above match, print the string itself, okay, not the string, the number itself. So print number if none of the above conditions are true. Okay, so let's go to business. So we have not talked about for loops in these lectures. We'll talk about for loops later. So I'll just show you the syntax first. So in a for loop, it's just like a simple if block. We have for I. You can call anything here. You can say for cool. You can say for cup. Anything you want to do here, but it's common convention to use I. For I in range. So this one I'll talk about later. So in range starts. You give it a stop index. You can give it a start, stop, and a step. But for me, I'm going to give it the stop. So I'll give it 101. Why did I give it 101 and I want to go to up to 100? So the range excludes the final value. So if we provide 100, the range will go up to 99, and we don't want that. So this is how a for loop looks like. And then a for loop takes in the block like the if statement, whereby it will run whatever is inside the block the time we said here, we have identified here, we have said now in a range. In range means if you don't specify a range, it will start at 0, and then whatever you provide, it will go up to that point, but excluding the end point. Okay, so for I means for each item in each iteration, because now in range you return 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the for loop will take each at a time. So for I, now I will be 0 in the first loop, then it will go back because we have not yet reached to our point. It will go back to the loop, and then I will be assigned to 1, go back 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like that. So I'll talk about for loops later in the videos, but I just wanted you to know how to get each number. So currently in the first iteration, I will hold 0. The second iteration, I will hold 1, 2, 3, like that. Now here's where you want to write our if statements. We have talked about if statements, the conditionals. So the first thing we need to do is to check if we want to see if I is divisible by 3 and 5. How do you check if something is divisible by 3 or 5? It's a number is divisible by another number if there is no remainder. And we talked about reminders in the previous lectures. What there's a instead of how do we get to know that this one is divisible by another number? We use the modulus operator, which returns the remainder. And if there's no remainder, that means that that number is divisible by the current dividing number. So if I modulus 5, we start with 5, is equals to 0, that means there's no remainder. If there's no remainder, this one is divisible. And I modulus 3 is equals to 0. We have talked about if statements. You can write whatever conditions provided they evaluate to true or false. So this means, is I divisible by 5? True. Is I divisible by 3? True. Then we get into that code block and then execute that code. If any of these fails, that means the evaluation will go back to false. And if it's false, it checks for other if statements. And if there is none, then it goes on with the loops. So we print FizzBuzz. Okay. We come here and say we want to check something else. If that one fails, we check something else. We can check if I modulus 3 is equals to 0. We print fizz. You can see I'm looking up in the problem statement. I'm looking here, so you can see this one is fizz, this one. Then we can finally check elif I modulus 5 is equals to 0. Then we can print buzz. Then if everything fails, we have talked about what we default to. We default to the else block, and then else we print that current I. So now here we have a problem. We talked about the if statement. So if this one evaluates to true, all these others are ignored. Okay. So let's take a scenario like the number 15. The number 15 is both divisible by 3 and divisible by 5. So that means the number 15 is I modulus 5 equals to 0. Yes. We don't have a remainder when we divide 15 by 5. And is I modulus 3 divisible? Is it divisible? Yes. So we get into this and print FizzBuzz, and that's what we want. That's what we want. Now, here you can note that the order matters. What if we had this one at the top? So let me clean up this. So we can say this one is the if now, because it is the starting one. What will happen in the case of number like 15? So the arrangement matters, the order matters, extremely matters, because now we want if that specific number is divisible by both 5 and 3, we want to print FizzBuzz. But what will happen if we provide 15 into the current loop? Let's do that. So I wanted to test it. Let me test it very fast. We can do away with the loop for now. Then I can do something like that. I want for you to see what will happen. Then I can say I is equals to 15. Okay. So let's see. So we expect 15 to print us FizzBuzz, but what do we see? I ran the wrong code. So Python exercises.py. So we found fizz, but this is not what we want. Why did we find print? We print fizz. We want FizzBuzz because the first expression evaluated to true. So that means we printed fizz and ignored all the others. Do we want that to happen? No, because the order matters. So let me revert how it was initially. So this one is now the elif, and now this one is the if. the order matters, and then you can see the order matters. So we found what we wanted, because if it's divisible by both 3 and 5, then we want to print FizzBuzz, and then all the others are ignored. Okay, so back to our code. Let me go back to the for loop code. Yes, that's the for loop code. So we have talked about the order. The order matters, and you have to take point of this. The order matters, and if I now print my function, it should give me something interesting. Yes. So we can see at 0 we got FizzBuzz, at 1 we got 1, 2, 3 is divisible by 3 alone, not both. We got Fizz. 5 is divisible by only 5 alone. We got Buzz. This one is our number 15. Where is that number 15? This one, 14, 15. 15 is divisible by both. So we got Fizz Buzz. Yeah, thank you guys for listening, and see you next. You are welcome.